Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Super English Talks. Today, I want to share a story from my past, a moment that I will never forget. This episode is meant to help you improve your listening and writing skills. As you listen, pay attention to how I tell the story, how I describe things, and how I show emotions. Later, you can try writing your own story about a special moment in your life. Before we start, I want to ask you a few questions. Have you ever had an experience that changed the way you look at life? Do you have a memory that makes you smile or feel excited when you think about it? How would you describe that memory to someone who wasn't there? Try to notice the small details and the feelings it brings. Now, I will share my story. It happened on a warm summer evening about 5 years ago. I was sitting at a small cafe in Paris. The cafe was very close to the Eiffel Tower, just a short walk away. The air smelled like fresh bread and pastries, and in the background, a street performer was playing the violin softly. I had spent the whole day exploring the city, and I was ready to relax and enjoy the moment. Suddenly, a little boy walked up to my table. He looked no older than 7. He was holding a small notebook and a pen. "Bonjour," he said with a shy smile. His parents were standing a few steps behind him, watching and nodding encouragingly. The boy explained that he was learning English and wanted to practice by asking tourists a few questions. I was amazed by his bravery and curiosity. He asked me, "What is your favorite part of Paris so far?" I smiled and replied, "The people, just like you, who make this city feel so warm and welcoming." His face lit up, and he said merci with a big smile before running back to his parents. That small moment stayed in my mind. It reminded me that even simple gestures can connect people from different countries and backgrounds. It also made me think about how brave it is to step out of your comfort zone, especially when learning something new like a language. As you listen to this story, think about your own special memories. How would you describe a similar moment? What details would you include? How would you make your listener feel like they were there with you? Let's continue. After the little boy ran back to his parents, I stayed at the table for a few minutes, thinking about how meaningful that small interaction had been. The sun was setting behind the Eiffel Tower, painting the sky and the city with a warm golden light. It felt like the whole city was hugging me softly. I could hear people talking quietly around me, children laughing as they played, and the steady sound of footsteps on the cobblestone streets. It was one of those moments that feels timeless, almost like it had been planned by the universe to remind me of the beauty in everyday life. Moments like this are small but unforgettable. They teach us about kindness, courage, and the joy of connecting with others. So, when you think about your own memories, remember to notice the details, the smells, the sounds, the light, and most importantly, the feelings. That is what makes a story come alive. And when you try to tell your own story, try to include these details. Describe not only what happened, but also how it made you feel. This is the key to becoming a better listener and writer. What made this moment so unforgettable wasn't just the little boy's question. It was the warmth and connection I felt with him, even though we didn't speak the same language or come from the same culture. That's the real power of human interaction. Sometimes it isn't about the words we use, it's about how we make other people feel. When I think back to that day, what stands out the most is the kindness in his eyes. He was eager to learn, to connect, and to make the most of his short conversation in English. That simple effort left a lasting impression on me. Now, take a moment and think about yourself. Can you remember a time when a small encounter made a big impact on you? Maybe it happened while you were traveling, or perhaps it was an unexpected conversation with someone that made you see the world a little differently. The beauty of storytelling is that it turns ordinary moments into something meaningful. Sharing them helps others feel what you felt. For me, sitting in that cafe in Paris and talking to the little boy wasn't just a nice experience, it reminded me of the universal connection we all share as humans. We all have small or big moments that shape who we are, and telling those stories can connect us with others. As I sat there that evening, the soft breeze carrying the scent of nearby flowers, I thought about how much storytelling can teach us. Every story has the power to inspire, to teach, or even to heal. The art of storytelling isn't just in the words we choose, it's in the emotions we share and the experiences we describe. Think about how you can tell your own stories so others feel like they are right there with you. What details would you include? What emotions would you share? These are important questions to ask as you practice your English listening and writing skills. Every detail in a story matters. From the smell of the cafe, to the boy's shy smile, to the sound of his voice, each part makes the story richer and more engaging. When you write or speak in English, try to paint a picture with your words. Describe not just what happened, but also what you felt, what you saw, and what you learned. This will make your storytelling more engaging and help others understand your perspective. Imagine if I told this story without any details. I could say I was in Paris. A boy asked me a question. It was a nice experience. That version doesn't have the same emotional impact. The sights, sounds, feelings, and small details are what make a story memorable. As you continue improving your English, think about how you can add details to your own stories. Doing this will help you sound more natural and help your listener connect with you on a deeper level. Have you ever had a moment where you didn't expect much, but it ended up meaning a lot to you? Maybe it was a short conversation with a stranger, a small act of kindness, or an experience that seemed ordinary at first. These are the moments that make life beautiful and they make the best stories. Sometimes, we see someone or something that leaves a lasting impression on us. These are the moments that stay in our memory because they are tied to strong emotions. And emotions are what make stories unforgettable. Think about how you could use this idea in your own life. You could write a short story about a moment that had a big impact on you, just like I did. It doesn't have to be a grand event. Often, the most powerful moments are small ones. Maybe a stranger helped you when you didn't expect it. Maybe you saw something beautiful during your day, or something unexpected happened that made you stop and think. These small moments are full of details and emotions, and they are perfect for storytelling. When you practice your English listening skills, remember that listening to real-life stories helps you understand how to tell your own. Whether you are speaking or writing, start by thinking about the emotions you want to share. Then, think about the details that will bring your story to life. These two things, feelings and details, make your story meaningful for your listener or reader. Every time you share a story, you're not just practicing English. You're also learning how to connect with others on a deeper level. Storytelling helps your English sound natural. It helps you express your thoughts clearly and allows you to engage with others in meaningful ways. Let's keep practicing by thinking about moments in our lives that are unforgettable. These moments might help you improve your English in ways you never expected. Now, let's look at how to break down a personal story even further. Think about the kinds of stories you would like to share with someone else. The goal isn't just to tell the story. The goal is to make it come alive for the listener. A good story doesn't just inform, it connects, evokes feelings, and creates a shared experience. Here's an example that many people can relate to. Imagine a time when you faced a challenge. Something that made you feel nervous or unsure, but in the end, you overcame it. What did you learn from that experience? How would you tell that story so someone else could feel it too? For me, I remember a time when I had to give a presentation in front of a large group of people. At first, I felt terrified. My palms were sweaty and my heart was racing. I had prepared for weeks, but I still worried that I might make a mistake in front of everyone. Then, something changed. As soon as I started speaking, the nerves began to fade. I felt more confident with every word. The audience was kind, and their reactions gave me energy to keep going. In the end, it turned out to be one of the best presentations I've ever given. Let's break this story down to see why it works. First, notice how I described my initial feelings. I didn't just say I was nervous. I described my sweaty palms and racing heart. These are physical sensations that most people understand. Describing physical feelings is a great way to make your story more vivid and relatable. Your listener can almost feel what you felt. Next, I described the turning point when my fear started to fade. This moment of change is important in any story. It shows growth, progress, or a new understanding. Including a turning point makes your story more interesting and engaging. Highlighting a change in emotions or situations is a great way to keep your listener interested. When a story shows how feelings or events shift, it becomes more dynamic and exciting. For example, when I gave that presentation, I described how nervous I felt at the start and then how my confidence grew as I began speaking. I also mentioned the reactions of the crowd. Their kindness and support gave me energy and helped me continue. This part of the story shows the importance of support from others. It reminds us that we don't have to face challenges alone. People around us, friends, family, teachers, can make a big difference in how we handle difficult situations. Including these external influences adds depth to a story because it shows how our environment and the people in it affect our feelings. Think about your own life. Can you remember a time when you felt nervous, unsure, or scared, but later found the strength to keep going? Who helped you in that moment? Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you, a friend who encouraged you, or a family member who gave you confidence. Sharing these details in your story can help your listener understand your experience more fully. Now, let's consider a different type of story, one where something unexpectedly good happens. Maybe you weren't expecting a great day, but everything seemed to go right. For example, imagine a simple day at the park when you unexpectedly meet an old friend. You haven't seen each other in years, but the conversation flows easily. You catch up on everything that has happened in your lives. When telling this story, it's important to include the surprise. The fact that you didn't plan this encounter makes it special. You could describe the setting. Was it a sunny day? A cool, breezy afternoon? How did it feel to see your friend again? Did you immediately feel comfortable, or was there a brief awkward moment before reconnecting? In this type of story, the surprise and joy are key. It's not just about what happened, it's about how it made you feel. Describing your emotions allows the listener to experience the story with you and connect on a deeper level. Every story, whether big or small, has something to teach us. Stories help us understand our own feelings, our relationships, and how we experience the world. That's why storytelling is such a powerful tool for learning English. It helps you practice different tenses, descriptive words, and ways to express emotions. The more you tell stories, the more natural your speaking and writing will become. Take a moment to think about your own stories. What do they reveal about you? How do they connect with your feelings and experiences? The goal is to tell your stories in a way that is interesting and engaging for others while also improving your English. As you practice, remember to include small details. Describe what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. Describe physical sensations like your heart racing, your palms sweating, or the warmth of the sun on your face. These details make your stories vivid, relatable, and unforgettable. Stories are powerful because they allow us to share our experiences and connect with others. One of the most important things in storytelling is including emotions and showing how other people influenced your experiences. These details make your stories richer, more interesting, and memorable. The more you listen to stories, the better you will understand how to tell your own. Pay attention to how others tell their stories. What details do they include? How do they express their feelings? Listening carefully will help you learn how to structure your stories and make them come alive for your audience. Storytelling is a skill that will always help you, whether you are writing, speaking, or even thinking in English. It helps you express your ideas clearly and connect with other people. Think about a moment in your life that changed you. Maybe it was a big decision that shaped your future, or maybe it was a small, unexpected event that had a big impact. For example, imagine deciding to study abroad. At first, it might feel like a small step, but over time, it can completely change how you see the world. You could describe the uncertainty you felt when you first arrived in a new country. You didn't know anyone, and you were nervous about fitting in. Then, imagine meeting someone who became a close friend. Suddenly, the city started to feel familiar, and you began to enjoy the experience. As you spend more time there, you grow more confident. You learn new things, meet new people, and realize how much this experience has shaped who you are today. Stories like this show growth, change, and personal development. They teach us about overcoming challenges, adapting to new situations, and finding strength within ourselves. When you tell a story, think about how you felt at each point in the experience. What did you learn from the challenges you faced? What kind of person did you become as a result? These reflections make your story meaningful and engaging for others. You can also tell stories about other people who have influenced your life. Perhaps a family member, friend, or teacher helped you in a meaningful way. Maybe your grandmother gave you advice that guided you during a difficult time, or a teacher encouraged you to follow your dreams. Stories like these are powerful because they show how we are all connected. By sharing them, you honor the people who have shaped your life while sharing your own experience. The more you practice telling stories, the more confident you will become in expressing yourself in English. Whether you are writing an essay, having a conversation, or giving a presentation, the skills you gain from storytelling will help you communicate clearly and effectively. Think about the stories you want to tell and start practicing. The more you share them, the better you will become at connecting with your audience and bringing your ideas to life. Every story you tell is an opportunity to practice English. It doesn't matter if it's a small, everyday experience or a big, life-changing event. Each story helps you explore the language, build your vocabulary, improve your grammar, and become more comfortable speaking and listening. Storytelling is not just about listing events in order. It's about connecting with your audience and making them feel what you felt. Adding unique details to your stories is very important. Details make a story vivid and help the listener imagine the experience as if they were there with you. Details can include what you saw, what you heard, what you felt, and even small actions or gestures. They make your story come alive and make your English sound more natural. When you practice storytelling, remember that every detail matters and every emotion you share brings your story to life. When you tell a story, it's important to include details that help your listener imagine the experience. These details allow your listener to visualize the story and feel like they are part of it. For example, imagine you are telling a story about a road trip. You could mention the places you stopped, the people you met, and the conversations you had along the way. You might say, "We stopped at a small diner just outside of town. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. The waitress, an older woman with glasses, gave us a warm smile as we sat down." Now, your listener isn't just hearing about a road trip. They can imagine themselves in the diner with you, smelling the coffee, seeing the smiling waitress, and feeling the warmth of the moment. This is what makes a story powerful. Adding these small details also helps you practice using descriptive language and adjectives. For example, instead of just saying, "It was a nice day," you could say, "The sun was shining brightly, and the sky was a clear blue with only a few fluffy clouds drifting lazily by." By describing the environment, you create a complete picture in the listener's mind. They can almost feel the warmth of the sun and see the colors of the sky. Using this level of detail improves both your speaking and listening skills. You practice using more advanced vocabulary, and you learn how words can describe different situations. Another important part of storytelling is thinking about how the story unfolds. A good story often has a clear beginning, middle, and end. This structure helps your audience follow the narrative. In the beginning, you introduce the characters, the setting, and the situation. In the middle, you build the story by describing challenges or conflicts that arise. In the end, you provide a resolution or conclusion. For example, if you are telling a story about overcoming a personal challenge, you could start by explaining the difficulty you faced. Then you could describe the steps you took to overcome it. Finally, you could share what you learned from the experience. Following this structure helps you organize your thoughts and speak more clearly. In English, it is easy to get lost in the details and forget the main point, so having a clear structure is very helpful. Pacing is another important part of storytelling. Pacing is how quickly or slowly you tell the story. Sometimes it is good to slow down and focus on details, and other times you might want to speed up to create excitement or tension. For example, imagine you are telling a story about a surprise party. When describing the preparations, you might slow down and focus on the excitement of getting everything ready. You could say, "We spent hours decorating the house, making sure everything was perfect. We hung colorful balloons and set up the cake on the table, waiting for the big moment." But when the surprise happens, you might want to speed up the pacing. You could say, "Then the door opened, and everyone jumped out shouting, 'Surprise!'" Slowing down and speeding up at the right moments keeps your listener engaged and makes your story more dynamic. When telling a story, changing the pacing can make it more exciting. For example, if you are describing a surprise moment, you can slow down to focus on the details, like preparing for a party. Then, when the surprise happens, you can speed up to show excitement. You might say, "Then the door opened, and everyone shouted, 'Surprise!' Her face lit up with joy, and we all laughed together." Changing the pacing adds energy to your story and helps the listener feel the emotions you experienced. If a story moves too slowly without changes in pace, it can become boring. But when you change the rhythm, your story becomes dynamic and keeps your audience engaged. This technique also helps your speaking skills because you learn how to control your voice and tone to match the mood of the story. Another important part of storytelling is reflection. Some of the best stories are the ones where the storyteller reflects on what they learned or how they changed because of the experience. A story is not just about what happened. It's also about how it shaped you and what you took away from it. For example, you might tell a story about a difficult decision. Instead of just explaining the events, you could reflect on what you learned. You might say, "At the time, I wasn't sure if I made the right choice, but looking back, I see that it taught me to trust my instincts more." Reflection adds depth to your story and gives your listener something meaningful to think about. Reflecting on experiences also helps you practice critical thinking in English. It forces you to organize your thoughts and explain what you learned in a clear way. You also practice using more advanced sentence structures. Phrases like "looking back" or "in hindsight" can help you explain how your perspective has changed over time, which makes your English sound more fluent and natural. Another tip for storytelling is to think about your audience. Who are you telling the story to? Are they friends, family, or strangers? The way you tell your story may change depending on the audience. For example, if you are telling a story to a close friend, you might use casual language and inside jokes. But if you are telling the same story to a group of people you don't know well, you might choose more neutral language and avoid too many personal details. Adapting your story to your audience helps you make sure your message is received the way you want. Being aware of your audience also gives you a chance to practice using different tones and levels of formality. This is an important skill for speaking, writing, or even giving presentations and emails in real-life situations. To summarize, storytelling is a fantastic way to improve your English. By focusing on details, emotions, dialogue, pacing, reflection, and audience awareness, you practice many key language skills. When you tell stories in an organized and engaging way, you improve your listening, speaking, and writing abilities. Each time you tell a story, you also learn something new about the language and yourself. Whether the story is big or small, personal or shared, it is an opportunity to practice and grow. Keep telling stories, and over time, you will become more confident and fluent in English. Storytelling is not just fun, it is one of the best ways to improve your communication skills. Listening to stories is one of the best ways to improve your English. When you listen to others tell stories, whether in English or your native language, You can notice how they organize their story, use emotions, and create images in your mind. By paying attention to these techniques, you can use them in your own speaking and writing. The more you listen to different stories, the better you will become at recognizing different styles and adjusting your own storytelling approach. For example, if you listen to a podcast where the host talks about a trip abroad, notice how they describe the sights, sounds, and experiences. How do they make the place come alive? Are they using adjectives like bustling streets or vibrant markets? What kind of emotions do they show? Happiness, excitement, surprise? You can try incorporating these techniques into your own storytelling. Practice telling a similar story using your own details. The more you listen and practice, the stronger your skills will become. One key element of good storytelling is engaging your audience. You want to keep your listeners interested. One way to do this is by asking questions or involving them. If you are telling a story to a group, you could ask, "Can you imagine being in my shoes?" Or, "Have you ever experienced something similar?" Questions like these help your audience reflect on the story and connect with your experience. Storytelling is not just about sharing events, it's about inviting your listeners to step into your story with you. Humor is another great way to engage your audience. A well-timed joke or funny observation can make your story more enjoyable and memorable. For example, if you tell a story about getting lost in a new city, you could add a humorous twist. "I thought I was a world-class navigator, but after 10 minutes of walking in circles, I realized I was in the middle of a maze with no way out." It felt like a bad episode of a reality TV show. Using humor not only makes your story fun, but it also helps your listeners relax and enjoy the moment with you. Humor is also a useful tool for practicing your tone and voice. When you tell a funny story, you naturally change your tone to make it playful and lighthearted. This helps you practice speaking more fluently and expressively, which improves your overall English communication skills. Another important idea in storytelling is perspective. Perspective is the point of view from which you tell the story. You can tell a story in the first person, "I did this, I saw that." Or you can tell it in the third person, "He did this, they saw that." The perspective you choose changes how the story feels. A first-person story feels personal and intimate. The listener feels like they are hearing your own thoughts and emotions. A third-person story can give a broader view and show what different people were doing or feeling. Choosing the right perspective helps you tell the story in the way that works best for your audience. Perspective in storytelling is very important. It gives you the chance to include details and control how close or distant the audience feels from the characters. For example, if you are sharing a memory of a family gathering, you can tell the story in the first person. "I remember my aunt's face lighting up when she saw the gift I brought her. It was such a special moment." Or, you could use the third-person perspective. "At the family gathering, everyone was surprised when she opened the gift. Her face lit up with joy." Both ways are effective, but the perspective you choose changes how the audience connects with the story. First person feels personal and intimate, while third person can give a broader view of the situation. As you gain experience with storytelling, you will start to experiment with different techniques. One useful technique is a flashback. A flashback lets you jump back in time to show a moment from the past that adds meaning to your story. This can create suspense, interest, or emotional impact. For example, if you are telling a story about a challenging situation at work, you could start with the present difficulty and then use a flashback to explain how it happened. "I thought the meeting was going well until I remembered what happened last year. That's when I realized I had made the same mistake before, and I knew I had to do something differently this time." Flashbacks add layers to your story and help your audience understand the context. They also help you practice moving between different points in time, which is useful for telling more complex and engaging stories. Another technique is foreshadowing. This is when you hint at something that will happen later in the story. Foreshadowing creates anticipation and keeps listeners interested. For example, If you are telling a story about a surprise party, you might say, I knew something was off when my friend kept talking about how much she loved the color purple. It was a small detail, but I had a feeling it meant something. Later in the story, the surprise is revealed, and the purple color becomes a clue to the party theme. Foreshadowing adds mystery and excitement to your storytelling. By using these techniques, humor, perspective, flashbacks, and foreshadowing, you are not just learning to tell a story. You are learning to become a more dynamic and engaging speaker. These skills will improve your overall communication, whether you are sharing personal experiences, giving presentations, or writing stories and essays. Finally, think about your unique voice as a storyteller. Every storyteller has their own style. Some people are animated and expressive, while others are calm and measured. There is no right or wrong way to tell a story. The most important thing is to embrace your natural speaking style and make the story your own. Over time, as you practice and reflect on your storytelling, you will develop a style that feels authentic and comfortable for you. This is the key to becoming a confident and engaging storyteller. The best way to become a better storyteller and improve your English is to keep practicing. Every time you tell a story, you're developing your language skills, learning new vocabulary, and improving your ability to connect with your audience. Whether it is a personal experience, a memory, or even a fictional tale, storytelling helps you improve your speaking, listening, and writing in ways you might not expect. With practice, you can tell stories that captivate your audience, make them laugh, and leave them thinking long after the story is over. Storytelling is not just about speaking fluently, it's about connecting with your listeners, expressing emotions, and painting vivid pictures with your words. These are skills that take time to develop, but they're incredibly rewarding. Start by thinking about a moment in your life that made you feel a strong emotion. Happiness, sadness, excitement, or even fear. It could be a big moment, like winning an award or completing a challenge, or a small but meaningful moment, like finding your way in a new city or making a new friend. These kinds of moments are perfect for storytelling because they carry emotional weight. When you share them, your audience can feel what you felt and see what you saw. Let's break down the process of sharing a story step by step. 1. Set the scene. Begin by describing where and when the story takes place. Give your listener a clear image so they feel like they're there with you. For example, it was a cold winter evening in December, and the city streets were lit with bright holiday lights. I was walking home after a long day at work, and my breath made little clouds in the air. This kind of description creates a mood and draws your audience into the story. 2. Introduce the characters. Next, introduce the people in your story. These could be friends, strangers, or even yourself. Include details that make the characters feel real. Instead of saying, I met a woman, you could say, I met a woman with a warm smile and a soft, kind voice. She was carrying a small dog, and its tail wagged excitedly as we talked. These little details help your listeners picture the people and make the story more engaging. 3. Describe the main event. Now, tell the main event, the moment that made the story unforgettable. For example, if your story is about getting lost in a foreign country, describe your feelings, confused, nervous, or scared. Then explain how things happened. Did you ask someone for help? Did they go out of their way to guide you? Maybe they spoke a different language, but you found a way to communicate. By sharing the emotions and actions, your story comes alive. Use action verbs and descriptive words to make your audience feel the movement and the atmosphere. This makes your story more vivid and engaging. Storytelling is also a chance to practice different aspects of English. You can improve your vocabulary, learn how to describe people and places, practice expressing emotions, and experiment with tone and pacing. Every story you tell is an opportunity to become more confident and fluent. When telling a story, using dynamic language makes it more exciting for your listener. Instead of simply saying, I walked around looking for help, you could say, I wandered through the bustling streets, my eyes scanning every corner for a sign or a friendly face. My heart raced as I tried to remember the name of my hotel. These kinds of descriptions add movement and energy to your story, making it more engaging and fun to listen to. The conclusion of your story is very important. This is your chance to reflect on what happened and share what you learned or how you felt afterward. For example, if your story is about getting lost, you could say, in the end, a kind stranger helped me find my way. That experience taught me the importance of staying calm and trusting that there are good people willing to help, even when things feel overwhelming. Reflection gives your story closure and helps your audience understand why it was meaningful to you. Storytelling is also a great way to practice different types of language. When you tell a story, you naturally use a mix of past, present, and future tenses, along with descriptive words, action verbs, and connecting phrases. This variety makes storytelling an excellent way to expand your vocabulary and improve your grammar. Because you are sharing personal experiences, the words you use feel natural and easier to remember. Storytelling is also a wonderful way to build confidence in speaking English. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will feel expressing yourself. You can start by practicing with a friend, a family member, or even in front of a mirror. Pay attention to your tone, pace, and body language. Are you speaking clearly and at a steady pace? Are you using gestures to emphasize important points? These small actions make your storytelling more effective. Remember, storytelling does not have to be perfect. Your audience is not expecting you to be a professional speaker. They just want to hear your story and connect with you. Even if you make a mistake or forget a word, it is okay. Take a deep breath, pause if you need to, and keep going. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. Another great way to improve your storytelling is by listening to others. You can listen to podcasts, audiobooks, or even casual conversations. Pay attention to how people structure their stories, the words they choose, and how they engage their audience. By observing and learning from others, you can apply these techniques to your own storytelling. To make your practice even more effective, try recording yourself as you tell a story. Listen to the recording and think about what you did well and what you could improve. Did you pronounce the words clearly? Were your sentences easy to follow? Did you include enough details to make the story interesting? By reflecting on your own storytelling, you can identify areas to improve and track your progress over time. Remember, storytelling is a skill anyone can develop with practice. It is not just about speaking English. It is about expressing yourself, connecting with others, and sharing your unique experiences in a meaningful way. Think about the stories you want to tell. What moments in your life have made you laugh, cry, or feel inspired? Start with those stories, and you will be amazed at how much your English and your confidence can grow. Storytelling is a joyful way to share your voice and your experiences with the world. When you tell a story, it is not just about speaking. It is about engaging your audience and making them feel like they are part of the journey. Storytelling in English gives you a chance to practice many skills at once, expanding your vocabulary, improving your sentence structure, and keeping your audience interested. One of the best ways to make your story memorable is to focus on emotions. Think about how you felt during the story and how you can express those feelings in your words. For example, if you are telling a story about a surprise birthday party, describe your excitement. I could feel my heart race as I opened the door. The room was filled with laughter and music, and I was completely surprised to see all my friends standing there waiting for me. Emotions are powerful. When you describe exactly how you felt, your audience can relate, even if they have never had the same experience. Instead of saying, I was happy, you could say, I felt overwhelmed with joy and gratitude, and I couldn't stop smiling. This simple change in language adds depth and makes your story more engaging. Another technique that makes a story more interesting is the use of contrasts. Compare different parts of your story to show change or growth. For example, if you are telling a story about preparing for an important exam, you could describe how nervous you were before and how relieved and accomplished you felt afterward. Before the exam, my mind was clouded with doubt. I questioned whether I had studied enough. But after the exam, a sense of calm washed over me, and I realized that all my hard work had paid off. Contrasts in emotions or situations make your story dynamic. They create suspense and keep your listeners curious about what will happen next. These changes make the ending more satisfying because the audience sees the journey from struggle to success. Details are also very important. Use sensory language that appeals to sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. For example, instead of saying, "I went to the beach," describe what it looked, sounded, and felt like. The golden sand stretched for miles, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore was like music to my ears. The warm breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean, and I could feel the cool water rushing over my feet as I walked along. Adding these kinds of details helps your listeners imagine the scene. They feel like they're there with you, experiencing everything you describe. Sensory language, emotions, and contrasts all work together to make your story vivid, engaging, and memorable. When you tell a story, including sensory details makes it feel real. Describe what you see, hear, feel, smell, and even taste. For example, if you are telling a story about being at the beach, you might say, "The golden sand stretched for miles, and the waves crashed against the shore like music. The salty scent of the ocean was carried by the warm breeze, and I could feel the cool water rushing over my feet as I walked along the shoreline." These kinds of details help your audience imagine the scene in their minds. The more sensory details you include, the more your listeners or readers will feel like they're there with you, experiencing everything firsthand. Another important element of storytelling is pacing, the speed at which you tell your story. Pacing affects how your audience experiences your story. Sometimes it is effective to slow down, especially during important or emotional moments. For example, if you are telling a story about a moment that made you proud, you could slow down and say, "And at that very moment, everything changed. I had done it. I had completed the challenge, and I couldn't believe my own strength." Slowing down helps the listener feel the importance of the moment. On the other hand, when you are describing an exciting or fast-moving event, you might speed up your storytelling to match the action. For example, if you are telling a story about a race you ran, you could say, "The countdown began. My heart raced as I pushed forward. My legs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't stop. The finish line was in sight, and I could hear the crowd cheering as I ran faster." Changing the pace adds rhythm to your story. It can create tension, excitement, and a sense of time moving forward. Adjusting your pacing helps your audience feel the emotions of the story more strongly. As you practice storytelling, try to vary the types of stories you tell. Share funny stories, dramatic moments, or even surprising events. Each type of story gives you a chance to practice different language skills. A funny story might help you practice timing and using humor, while a dramatic story can help you use descriptive words and express stronger emotions. Surprising or unexpected events can help you practice suspense and keeping your audience interested. One of the best ways to improve your storytelling and your listening skills is to listen to other people tell stories. This could be through podcasts, interviews, or conversations with friends. Pay attention to how they structure their stories, the words they use, and how they make the audience feel involved. Notice what makes their storytelling effective. How do they build suspense? How do they make their story funny or emotional? Then, try to use some of these techniques in your own stories. Reading books and articles is also very helpful. Novels, in particular, are full of examples of storytelling. Notice how authors introduce characters, describe settings, and create tension. Think about how they make you feel involved in the story. You can use these ideas when you tell your own stories in English. Remember, storytelling is a skill you can always improve. The more you practice, the better you will become at connecting with your audience, expressing emotions, and sharing your experiences. Start small. Share simple stories with friends or family, and gradually tell longer or more complex stories. Every time you tell a story, you get a little better. Over time, you will notice that your English improves, your confidence grows, and you become more comfortable expressing yourself. As your English and storytelling skills grow, so does your ability to connect with others. Stories are more than just words, they reflect who we are. By sharing your experiences, thoughts, and feelings, you not only improve your English, but also help others understand your perspective. Every story you tell becomes part of the bigger narrative of your life. It makes your language skills more personal, meaningful, and memorable. Keep telling your stories, keep practicing your English, and most importantly, enjoy the process. With every story you share, you are not just becoming a better speaker, you are also becoming a better listener, writer, and communicator. One of the most important parts of storytelling, especially in English, is connecting with your audience. Connection happens when people see a part of themselves in your story. Even if your experiences are unique, you can make your story relatable. Start by finding a common theme, something that most people understand or have felt. For example, a story about overcoming a challenge can connect with anyone who has faced difficulties. A story about achieving a big success can relate to people who have worked hard to reach a goal. If you are sharing a memory about a school competition, you could begin by saying, "Have you ever worked so hard for something that you felt nervous and excited at the same time? That's how I felt when I entered my first science fair." With just a few words, you set the stage and invite your listeners into a familiar emotional space. Another way to make your stories more engaging is to include dialogue. Dialogue makes a story feel alive and real. For example, if you are telling a story about getting advice from a mentor, you could recreate the conversation. "I still remember when my teacher looked at me and said, 'You have the potential to do amazing things. You just have to believe in yourself.' That sentence stayed with me and changed the way I viewed myself." Dialogue helps your listeners feel like they are right there with you, experiencing the moment firsthand. Suspense is another technique that keeps your audience interested. Suspense doesn't mean your story has to be scary. It is simply about making your listeners curious about what happens next. One way to do this is by pausing before revealing an important detail. For example, "I opened the old, dusty box with trembling hands. My heart was racing as I wondered what I would find inside, and then I couldn't believe my eyes. There it was, a beautiful antique watch that had been missing for years." Pausing before the reveal makes your audience eager to hear the next part. Finally, reflection adds depth to your storytelling. After sharing the events, take a moment to explain why the story is important to you. This helps your audience understand its significance and connect with your experience. For example, if you are telling a story about a family tradition, you could say, "Every time I think about that day, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for my family." It's not just about the tradition itself, but about the love and connection we share. Reflection shows your listeners what you learned, how you grew, and invites them to think about their own experiences. By connecting with your audience, using dialogue, building suspense, and reflecting on your story, you make your storytelling more meaningful, engaging, and memorable. Practicing these skills will improve your English while helping you become a more confident and expressive communicator. When you tell a story, your tone and expression are very important. Even if your story is being shared through audio, the way you say things can have a big impact. Use your voice to show emotions. For example, if you are telling an exciting moment, let your voice sound excited. If you are sharing a sad memory, use a softer, gentler tone. Your tone is like the soundtrack of your story. It sets the mood and helps your listeners feel the emotions you experienced. Along with tone, pacing is also very important. Pacing means how fast or slow you tell your story. If your story has many events, think about where you can slow down to give more detail and where you can speed up to keep your audience interested. For instance, if you are talking about a long journey, you might summarize the less interesting parts and focus on the exciting moments. "The trip was long and tiring, but when we finally reached the mountain, the view took my breath away." The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the valley, and I knew it was worth every step. Slowing down and speeding up at the right moments makes your story more engaging. A strong ending is also very important. It leaves a lasting impression on your audience. One way to do this is by tying the ending back to the beginning. For example, if you started your story by asking, "Have you ever been so determined to succeed that nothing could stop you?" You could end by saying, "That moment taught me that determination and belief in yourself can truly make anything possible." This gives your story a sense of completeness and makes it feel well-rounded. Pay attention to the language you use. Vivid and specific words help your listeners imagine the scene. Instead of saying, "It was a nice day," you could say, "The sky was bright blue with fluffy white clouds drifting lazily. The sun warmed my face as a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers." These kinds of details bring your story to life and make it more enjoyable to listen to. Practicing storytelling in English also improves your listening skills. When you listen to other people's stories, you notice patterns, expressions, and cultural differences that you can use in your own storytelling. Pay attention to how others organize their stories, how they move from one event to another, and how they connect with their audience. The more you listen, the more you learn about the rhythm and flow of English storytelling. Finally, storytelling is a powerful way to express yourself and share your culture. By telling your stories, you are not only practicing English, but also building connections with your listeners. Whether it is a funny memory, a touching moment, or a life-changing experience, your stories can inspire, entertain, and teach others. Remember to keep practicing, keep listening, and keep sharing your experiences. Every story you tell will improve your English skills, boost your confidence, and help you communicate more effectively. Your voice matters, and your stories are worth telling. One of the most important things to remember is your audience. Think about who you are speaking to and adjust your words, tone, and details so your story is interesting and meaningful for them. When you tell a story, it is very important to think about who will be listening. Are they your friends, strangers, classmates, or a group of people with similar interests? The way you tell your story may change depending on your audience, but the most important parts of a great story remain the same: connection, emotion, and impact. For example, if you are telling a story to your friends, you can use a casual, informal tone. You might include jokes or references that only they understand. If you are talking to a professional audience, your language should be more formal, but you can still make your story interesting by adding personal details. Let's say you are sharing the story of your first job interview. With friends, you might say, "I was so nervous, I almost forgot how to breathe." You can make the moment funny and relatable. In a professional setting, you could say, "I was very nervous during my first job interview, but I learned how to manage pressure and present myself confidently." Both ways share the story, but the style changes depending on the listeners. Another way to make your story engaging is by adding sensory details. Describe what you saw, heard, smelled, or felt during the event. This helps your audience imagine that they're there with you. For example, instead of just saying, "I went to a concert," you could say, "The moment I walked into the concert hall, the sound of music hit me like a wave. The energy in the room was electric with people cheering and clapping. The smell of popcorn filled the air, and the colorful lights flashing across the stage added to the excitement." By using sensory details, you invite your audience into your world and let them feel the experience as you did. A good story also needs flow. It should move naturally from the beginning to the end. Sometimes, when we are excited to share a memory, we jump from one part of the story to another. This can confuse listeners. To keep your story clear, use transitions to guide your audience. For example, if you are talking about a trip, you could say, "After we arrived at the airport, we took a taxi to the hotel. As we drove through the city, I was amazed by the tall buildings and the busy streets. These simple phrases help your audience follow your story and imagine the events more clearly. Stories are not only about events, they are also about emotions. What you felt during the experience is often what makes your story memorable. For example, if you are telling a story about helping someone, you could say, "When I saw the elderly man struggling with his groceries, I felt a rush of compassion. I didn't think twice before rushing to help him. The gratitude in his eyes is something I will never forget." By showing your emotions, your story becomes more than a series of events. It becomes a personal experience that touches your listeners. Emotions don't always have to be serious or deep. Even small feelings like happiness, surprise, or excitement can make your story engaging. Sharing your feelings helps your audience connect with you and understand why the story matters. Stories do not always have to be serious. Sometimes, funny or lighthearted stories can be just as powerful. Humor is an excellent tool in storytelling because it makes your audience feel comfortable and connected to you. For example, imagine you are telling a story about a time you accidentally embarrassed yourself in public. Instead of focusing on how awkward you felt, you can highlight how funny the situation was. "I was walking down the street when I tripped over a crack in the sidewalk and spilled my coffee everywhere. I looked up and saw a group of people staring at me, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I burst out laughing. They started laughing too, and we all shared a moment of pure comedy." Sharing light moments like this shows your ability to laugh at yourself and lets your audience know that stories do not always have to be serious to make an impact. Another important element of storytelling is timing. Sometimes the best moments happen when you wait for the right moment to reveal them. If you rush through the important parts, you might lose the chance to make them memorable. Take your time and build anticipation. For example, if you are telling a story about a big surprise, "I had no idea what to expect when I walked into the room. As soon as I opened the door, I saw all my friends standing there with a big cake. My heart skipped a beat. This was the surprise I never saw coming." The pause before the big reveal makes the story more exciting and keeps your audience curious about what will happen next. Your delivery also matters a lot. Whether you are telling your story in person, on a podcast, or in a video, the way you speak can change how your story is received. Speaking too quickly can make listeners miss details, while speaking too slowly may lose their attention. Find a pace that is comfortable for you and keeps your audience engaged. If a part of your story is especially funny or emotional, don't be afraid to pause. This gives your audience time to react and allows you a moment to reflect before continuing. Pauses can make your story more effective and memorable. At its heart, storytelling is about creating lasting memories. The best stories are the ones that stay with people long after they hear them. Make your story meaningful, whether it is funny, inspiring, or emotional. Share it with the goal of making an impact. For example, if you are telling a story about a difficult challenge you faced and how you overcame it, your story could inspire others going through similar experiences. The power of storytelling comes from its ability to touch hearts and minds. By sharing your experiences, you connect with others on a human level. As you practice storytelling, remember to reflect on your emotions. Add descriptive details so your audience can imagine the scene. Create a flow that guides listeners through your story. The more you practice, the better you will become at connecting with your audience and sharing stories that are both memorable and meaningful. Storytelling is more than just saying words. It is about how you tell your story. Your tone, timing, pacing, and emotion all make a big difference. The more you focus on these elements, the more your stories will captivate, entertain, and inspire others. When you tell a story, the way you share it makes a big difference in how people receive it. You are not just telling them what happened, you are giving them a window into your thoughts, feelings, and life. Think about it. When you hear a great story, it sticks with you. That's because the storyteller did more than just list events. They made you feel something. For example, Imagine you took a trip to a place you always wanted to visit. If you just say, "I went to Paris," the story is simple, but not very engaging. Instead, you can add small details that make the trip special. You might describe walking down the streets of Paris, the smell of fresh croissants from a bakery, the sound of busy traffic mixed with people chatting, and the feeling of excitement in the air. You could say, "When I first stepped out of the airport, the cool Parisian breeze greeted me, and I couldn't help but smile. People hurried to catch their taxis, and I immediately felt the energy of the city." Using sensory details, what you see, hear, smell, touch, or feel helps bring your story to life. It lets your audience imagine themselves there with you. Sometimes it's not just about what you see, it's about what you felt. Let's say you are telling a story about a difficult moment, like preparing for an important exam. Instead of just saying, "I studied hard for the test," you could describe your feelings. "I spent hours in the library, feeling the weight of the books on my shoulders. My eyes were tired, but I kept pushing forward. The pressure to do well felt overwhelming, but I reminded myself I had prepared for this moment." Adding emotions makes your story more relatable and real. People may not have had the same exact experience, but they remember times when they felt similar pressure, excitement, or nervousness. This is why storytelling is such a powerful way to connect with others. It allows you to share human experiences and bond over universal emotions. Another important element is pacing, how fast or slow you tell your story. You can have all the right details and emotions, but if the story is too fast or too slow, it may lose its impact. For example, imagine a funny story about a time you embarrassed yourself. If you rush through it, your audience may not have time to react. But if you slow down and build the moment, the story becomes much funnier. I was walking down the street when suddenly I tripped over a sidewalk crack and went flying. It felt like time slowed down. Everyone was staring, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I burst out laughing. And you know what? They started laughing too. We all ended up having a good laugh together, and that became one of the best memories of the day. When you reflect on the overall impact of storytelling, remember that the way you communicate your experiences affects how deeply your listeners connect. Personal details, emotional descriptions, and reflections all work together to create a story that is more than just a simple list of events. By including these elements, your listeners can form their own connections to your story and even see themselves in your experiences. Even the smallest details, the way someone smiled, the smell of food, the feeling of excitement, can make your story more vivid and meaningful. In storytelling, details often make the biggest impact. The small things, the way the air smells, the sounds in the background, the expressions on people's faces, can make your story vivid and real. These details help your audience visualize the scene, making the story come alive in their minds. Sharing light moments like this shows your ability to laugh at yourself and lets your audience know that stories do not always have to be serious to make an impact. Another important element of storytelling is timing. Sometimes the best moments happen when you wait for the right moment to reveal them. If you rush through the important parts, you might lose the chance to make them memorable. Take your time and build anticipation. For example, if you are telling a story about a big surprise. I had no idea what to expect when I walked into the room. As soon as I opened the door, I saw all my friends standing there with a big cake. My heart skipped a beat. This was the surprise I never saw coming. The pause before the big reveal makes the story more exciting and keeps your audience curious about what will happen next. Your delivery also matters a lot. Whether you are telling your story in person, on a podcast, or in a video, the way you speak can change how your story is received. Speaking too quickly can make listeners miss details, while speaking too slowly may lose their attention. Find a pace that is comfortable for you and keeps your audience engaged. If a part of your story is especially funny or emotional, don't be afraid to pause. This gives your audience time to react and allows you a moment to reflect before continuing. Pauses can make your story more effective and memorable. At its heart, storytelling is about creating lasting memories. The best stories are the ones that stay with people long after they hear them. Make your story meaningful, whether it is funny, inspiring, or emotional. Share it with the goal of making an impact. For example, if you are telling a story about a difficult challenge you faced and how you overcame it, your story could inspire others going through similar experiences. The power of storytelling comes from its ability to touch hearts and minds. By sharing your experiences, you connect with others on a human level. As you practice storytelling, remember to reflect on your emotions. Add descriptive details so your audience can imagine the scene. Create a flow that guides listeners through your story. The more you practice, the better you will become at connecting with your audience and sharing stories that are both memorable and meaningful. Storytelling is more than just saying words. It is about how you tell your story. Your tone, timing, pacing, and emotion all make a big difference. The more you focus on these elements, the more your stories will captivate, entertain, and inspire others. When you tell a story, the way you share it makes a big difference in how people receive it. You are not just telling them what happened, you are giving them a window into your thoughts, feelings, and life. Think about it. When you hear a great story, it sticks with you. That's because the storyteller did more than just list events. They made you feel something. For example, imagine you took a trip to a place you always wanted to visit. If you just say, "I went to Paris," the story is simple, but not very engaging. Instead, you can add small details that make the trip special. You might describe walking down the streets of Paris, the smell of fresh croissants from a bakery, the sound of busy traffic mixed with people chatting, and the feeling of excitement in the air. You could say, "When I first stepped out of the airport, the cool Parisian breeze greeted me, and I couldn't help but smile. People hurried to catch their taxis, and I immediately felt the energy of the city." Using sensory details, what you see, hear, smell, touch, or feel helps bring your story to life. It lets your audience imagine themselves there with you. Sometimes it's not just about what you see, it's about what you felt. Let's say you are telling a story about a difficult moment, like preparing for an important exam. Instead of just saying, "I studied hard for the test," you could describe your feelings. "I spent hours in the library, feeling the weight of the books on my shoulders. My eyes were tired, but I kept pushing forward. The pressure to do well felt overwhelming, but I reminded myself I had prepared for this moment." Adding emotions makes your story more relatable and real. People may not have had the same exact experience, but they remember times when they felt similar pressure, excitement, or nervousness. This is why storytelling is such a powerful way to connect with others. It allows you to share human experiences and bond over universal emotions. Another important element is pacing, how fast or slow you tell your story. You can have all the right details and emotions, but if the story is too fast or too slow, it may lose its impact. For example, imagine a funny story about a time you embarrassed yourself. If you rush through it, your audience may not have time to react. But if you slow down and build the moment, the story becomes much funnier. I was walking down the street when suddenly I tripped over a sidewalk crack and went flying. It felt like time slowed down. Everyone was staring, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I burst out laughing. And you know what? They started laughing too. We all ended up having a good laugh together, and that became one of the best memories of the day. When you reflect on the overall impact of storytelling, remember that the way you communicate your experiences affects how deeply your listeners connect. Personal details, emotional descriptions, and reflections all work together to create a story that is more than just a simple list of events. By including these elements, your listeners can form their own connections to your story and even see themselves in your experiences. Even the smallest details, the way someone smiled, the smell of food, the feeling of excitement, can make your story more vivid and meaningful. In storytelling, details often make the biggest impact. The small things, the way the air smells, the sounds in the background, the expressions on people's faces, can make your story vivid and real. These details help your audience visualize the scene, making the story come alive in their minds. For example, imagine you are telling a story about feeling nervous before an important meeting. Instead of just saying, "I was nervous," you can describe it like this. Before the meeting, my hands were sweating and my heart was racing. The office was quieter than usual. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder, and I could hear the soft tapping of my colleagues' shoes as they walked past. It felt like the world had slowed down, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to do well. By adding sensory details, you make your story more relatable. Everyone has felt nervous or excited, so these descriptions help your listeners remember their own similar moments, creating an emotional connection. Connecting emotionally with your audience is very important. Facts tell a story, but emotions make it memorable. Ask yourself, what did I feel at the time? How did those feelings affect my choices or the outcome? For instance, if you are telling a story about moving to a new city, you might say, "When I first landed in the new city, I felt a wave of homesickness. It was strange being far away from everything familiar. I missed my family, the smell of my mother's cooking, and even the sound of the rain against my window back home. At that moment, I questioned if I had made the right decision. But as the days passed, I began to feel excitement about new opportunities, meeting new people, learning new things, and discovering a place that would eventually feel like home." Sharing emotions like this allows listeners to empathize with your experience. They might not have faced the exact same situation, but they understand the feelings, which creates a bond between you and your audience. Stories are also about growth and change. They often show how a situation transformed you or helped you learn something new about yourself. Highlighting moments of personal growth gives your story depth and meaning. For example, if you faced a challenge, don't just talk about how hard it was, focus on how it helped you evolve. I'll never forget the first time I had to speak in front of a large audience. I was terrified, my heart was pounding, and my voice was shaky. But as I spoke, something incredible happened. I realized that I wasn't just talking to a crowd, I was sharing something meaningful. By the end, I had gained confidence, not only in speaking but also in myself. Stories like this show overcoming fear, learning lessons, and gaining new perspectives, which makes your storytelling more inspiring and memorable. Reflection and growth. One of the most powerful ways to engage your audience is through reflection. Reflection is more than just describing what happened. It's about sharing what you learned or how the experience changed you. By reflecting, you can offer wisdom, advice, or a new perspective that helps your listeners see things in a different way. For example, looking back, I realized that moving to a new country was more than just learning a new culture or language. It was about embracing change and stepping out of my comfort zone. It made me more open-minded, adaptable, and confident in facing the unknown. I learned that change doesn't have to be scary. It can be an opportunity for personal growth. Sharing reflections like this gives your audience something to think about long after the story ends. It helps them reflect on their own experiences and see how they've grown as well. Making your story relatable. To make your story accessible and relatable, focus on universal experiences and emotions. You don't need to share every detail of your life, just the parts that others can connect with easily. Some universal themes include adapting to a new environment, achieving a goal, facing fears or challenges. For example, if you are telling a story about a job interview, Focus on the feelings rather than technical details. I remember my first job interview. I was so nervous that I could barely think straight. When they asked a question I wasn't expecting, I froze. My palms were sweating and my face turned red. But then I remembered it was okay to not have all the answers. I took a deep breath and answered honestly. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. By sharing experiences like this, you help your audience see themselves in your story. Relatable stories make your audience feel connected and engaged, drawing your audience in. Another key part of storytelling is keeping your audience hooked and engaged. One way to do this is by creating suspense. Build up to the moment when everything changes, whether it's a breakthrough, realization, or exciting event. For example, at that moment, I wasn't sure what would happen next. I didn't know if things would work out, but I knew one thing. I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to give up. This kind of gradual buildup makes your audience eager to hear what happens next. It keeps them involved in the story and creates anticipation. Stories do more than entertain. A great story is not just something fun to listen to. It also makes people think and reflect. When you share your story, you can ask your listeners questions that help them connect with your experience. For example, you could ask, "Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past? How did it feel? Did it bring back old memories, or did it open the door to something new?" By asking questions like these, your story becomes interactive. It is no longer just about you. It becomes a shared experience. Your audience feels more involved and engaged. Exploring emotions in your story. Stories are not just about events. They are also about feelings. Take the time to describe the emotions you experienced at each part of your story. Were you excited, nervous, relieved, or happy? How did these emotions affect your choices? For example, if you are telling a story about overcoming a fear, you could say, "I remember standing at the edge of the diving board, looking down at the water below. My heart was pounding and adrenaline was rushing through me. Part of me wanted to climb back down and stay safe, but another part knew I had to jump. When I finally jumped, it felt like time slowed down. The rush of air, the splash of the water, and the feeling of accomplishment hit me all at once. It was terrifying and exciting at the same time." By describing your emotions in detail, your listeners can connect deeply with your story. They may not have had the exact same experience, but they can relate to the feelings of fear, courage, and triumph. Encouraging growth through storytelling. One of the best things about storytelling is that you can share the lessons you learned. These lessons can inspire your listeners and encourage them to think about their own lives. For example, if your story is about taking a risk, you could say, "Looking back, I realized that taking that leap was one of the best decisions I ever made. It taught me that the biggest rewards often come when we step outside our comfort zones. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it." When you share insights like this, you are not just telling a story, you are offering guidance and wisdom that your listeners can use in their own lives. The power of vulnerability. Don't be afraid to show your struggles and doubts in your story. Being honest makes your story more real and relatable. It shows your audience that you are human, just like them. For example, if you are telling a story about failing, you could say, "I was devastated when I didn't get the job I wanted. I had worked so hard and thought I had done everything right. For days, I felt like a failure. But then I realized that every setback is a chance to learn. I used the feedback I received to improve my skills, and eventually I got a job that was an even better fit for me." By sharing your vulnerability, you create a space where your listeners can connect with their own experiences. It helps build trust and a deeper connection with your audience. Reflecting on your stories. Every story has lessons and insights. When you share your story, take a moment to reflect on what it means to you. This reflection helps your audience understand why the story is important. For example, if your story is about a special moment in your life, you could end with, "This story reminds me that small moments can teach big lessons. It taught me to appreciate life and the people around me. It showed me that even challenges can help us grow." Reflection makes your story meaningful and gives your listeners something to think about long after the story ends. The importance of listening and sharing. The more stories you listen to, the more you learn about how to tell stories yourself. Each story you hear teaches you about language, expressions, emotions, and culture. And the more you share your own stories, the better you become at speaking, listening, and communicating. Storytelling is a powerful way to connect with others and to grow your confidence in English. Keep practicing. Remember, every story you tell helps you improve your English. It also helps you understand yourself and your experiences better. Don't be afraid to start small. Share simple stories with friends or family and gradually work up to longer or more complex stories. Your stories are unique and valuable, and they can inspire, entertain, and teach others. Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep sharing your experiences. Every story you tell is a step toward becoming a better speaker, listener, and communicator. Stories are powerful. They entertain, inspire, and teach. They allow us to connect with others and reflect on our own lives. Keep telling your stories, keep learning, and enjoy the journey. Your voice matters, and your stories are worth sharing.